Okay, on this final 3 weeks of term, we're going to be looking at globalisation, the impact that globalisation's had on Australia and the rest of the world, and also looking at sort of the emergence of international trade. So when we're looking at globalisation, the strict definition of globalisation is quite tricky, but basically what it means is the closer integration or linking together of countries and people all around the world. So it's basically about the world becoming more interdependent on each other, and moving towards operating as one single market. So the two key things in that definition is that it's about the world becoming more interdependent or reliant on one another, and moving towards having one single market, which involves removing all barriers to trade, all barriers to investment. So that means that you can invest in other countries, and barriers to labour, so that increasing immigration and flows that way as well. So it's the closer integration or moving together of countries around the world by removing barriers to trade, investment and labour. It's all about establishing one global marketplace. So when we're talking about globalisation, when you're defining it, all the things that are incorporated within globalisation, again, it includes increased international trade. So removing tariffs, removing quotas, subsidies. We talked about local content rules, removing barriers to trade between countries. This idea of internationalism of financial markets, okay, a lot of that means that countries can borrow from each other, and there's freedom to borrow and lend all around the world. So that's another part of it, which we'll talk about a little bit more in more detail. Companies operating in more than one country, so the establishment of multinational companies is a big part of globalisation. Countries taking advantage of cheap labour, taking advantage of lower company tax rates in order to maximise their profits. Offshoring and outsourcing, so outsourcing when you source labour and when you get parts of your business to operate overseas. So for example, Telstra, for example, might have their call centres in India is a good example of outsourcing, and offshoring is when the whole company moves overseas. Increased investment, so you can invest in overseas companies, they can invest in Australia, so for example Japan can invest in Qantas, or Australian companies can invest abroad, are all examples of globalisation. And then freer movement of labour, so increased immigration, goods, services and ideas. So all of these things are incorporated within globalisation. When you think of it, the main things that probably comes to mind are the protection of imports and exports, so removing tariffs and subsidies and quotas. But it's not just about goods. It's not just about trading goods between countries. When you're defining globalisation and talking about globalisation, it's about being aware that it's also about encouraging increased investment between nations. So allowing them to work together and to provide capital and funds to one another for business expansion. It's increased immigration, so allowing flow of people between countries. It's about multinational companies operating all around the world. So Apple and Amazon and all these large companies, Walmart, having branches all around the world. Even Commonwealth Bank and NAB have branches in other countries. International division of labour, so splitting up parts of the production process in different countries. So Apple, for example, a lot of the phones are manufactured in China and then sold all around the world, but it's still an American company. It also includes cooperation on environmental issues. So the Kyoto Protocol is an example of globalisation, working together to try and solve environmental issues. Outsourcing of labour, which we talked about. Increased importance of global corporations, so corporations operating all around the world. And it also just includes basic things like buying goods on the internet from overseas, communication through the internet, the use of Skype to talk to people around the world, and just having relationships with people all around the world. Okay, we're going to look at the main causes of globalisation in the next video.